Ethan felt the hum of the starship beneath his feet as he walked through the polished corridors. This was no ordinary assignment. He had been hired to serve the alien Queen Larissa, ruler of the Xelera system. And though he had read the briefing, he still had no idea what awaited him. The ship shimmered with an ethereal glow, its walls alive with soft pulses of light that seemed to respond to his every step. He paused to take in the view through the panoramic windows. The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly, stars twinkling like diamonds scattered across black velvet. When Ethan first learned about the job, he thought it would be a simple position: monitor systems, repair equipment, ensure the palace technology functioned properly. But the pay and the prestige were beyond anything he had imagined. Now, as the ship approached the orbital palace, he realized that nothing about this place was simple. The palace itself floated like a giant crystal in orbit around a blue-green planet. Its spires glowed with a faint violet light, and intricate energy lines ran across its surface, pulsing rhythmically as if the building itself were alive. Ethan's heart pounded as the ship docked. He had never seen anything so magnificent. As the doors opened, he was greeted by beings taller than humans, with elongated limbs and luminous skin. Their eyes were deep pools of color, shifting constantly in ways that made it hard to look away. One of them bowed politely and led Ethan through the vast halls, explaining that the Queen would see him shortly. Finally, he stood before Larissa. She was sitting on a throne that seemed to float slightly above the ground, her presence radiating authority. Her violet eyes fixed on him, glowing softly. She had long silver hair that shimmered in the light, and her skin seemed almost translucent. Ethan had read about alien royalty before, but nothing prepared him for this. Larissa did not speak immediately. Instead, she observed him quietly, her gaze sharp but curious. "You are Ethan, from Earth?" she asked finally, her voice melodic and clear. Even though she spoke in an alien language, the translation device embedded in Ethan's collar rendered every word perfectly. "Yes, Your Majesty," Ethan replied, bowing respectfully. Larissa nodded slowly. "You will serve here. You will maintain the systems. You will ensure the palace operates without flaw." Her tone was calm, but there was an intensity in her eyes that made Ethan uneasy. "I understand," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. He had expected this, but something about the way she looked at him suggested there was more to this job than he had been told. Over the next few hours, Ethan was introduced to the palace's inner workings. He walked through halls filled with devices he could barely comprehend. Some seemed to manipulate energy, while others created holographic landscapes that shifted and moved as if alive. He learned how to monitor the palace's security grids, environmental controls, and transport systems. Everything was sophisticated, but Ethan found himself fascinated. Despite the pressure, he felt a spark of excitement. Then came the first unusual task. Larissa asked him to arrange a series of floating crystal panels in the central hall. At first, it seemed like a simple maintenance job. But as he worked, he realized the crystals responded to emotion. When he hesitated, unsure where to place one, it hummed softly and shifted slightly in the air. Larissa watched him, her expression unreadable. "You are cautious," she said. "Good. You will need caution here. But you must also learn to trust your instincts." Ethan nodded, though he was unsure what she meant. Every action in the palace seemed to carry weight beyond mere functionality. It was as if the building itself tested him, assessing his decisions and reactions. As the day progressed, he began noticing subtle details about the Queen. She often observed humans on screens from across the galaxy, her eyes lingering on expressions, gestures, and moments of courage. Ethan wondered if she was studying him in the same way. When he repaired a delicate energy conduit, she approached him quietly and said, "You see things differently. Most humans would break it." There was no flattery in her voice, only recognition. Later, During a brief break, Ethan explored a part of the palace that was less regulated. He stumbled upon a corridor filled with strange symbols and small chambers containing artifacts from various planets. Some were objects of art. Others appeared to be personal keepsakes. He could sense that Larissa's life was more than just politics and control. She collected moments, experiences, and memories from across the galaxy. That evening, he was called to the throne room again. Larissa asked him to stand beside a holographic map of her star system. Stars and planets floated in 3 dimensions, glowing softly. "I have traveled far," she said. "I have seen worlds, civilizations, and wonders. Yet something is missing. Something no one has given me." Ethan listened, unsure how to respond. He felt a strange mix of awe and curiosity. No one had ever spoken so openly, even indirectly, about desires or dreams at this level of power. The Queen's words hinted at loneliness, a need for understanding, and perhaps a connection that transcended her role as ruler. "You will stay here," she said finally. "You will serve, but you will also observe, learn, and perhaps understand." Ethan bowed, realizing that his job was far more complex than maintenance. It was a test, a challenge, and perhaps a journey into something he could not yet imagine. As he left the throne room, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had changed forever. The palace was not just a place of power, it was a living entity. And the Queen was at its heart, seeking something he had not yet discovered. That night, as Ethan prepared for sleep in the quarters provided for him, he stared out the window at the glowing palace spires. He thought about the Queen's words and the strange tasks she had given him. There was curiosity in her gaze, a challenge in her commands, and a subtle invitation to see the universe in ways he never had before. Ethan realized that serving the alien Queen would test more than his skill. It would test his mind, his courage, and perhaps his very humanity. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt both excitement and fear in equal measure, standing on the threshold of a world unlike anything he had ever known. The next morning, Ethan awoke to the soft hum of the palace's energy systems. Light filtered through the tall windows, casting shimmering patterns on the walls. He dressed quickly, remembering the Queen's instructions from the previous day. Though he had barely begun to understand his role, a sense of purpose settled over him. Serving Larissa was no ordinary job, and he could feel that each day would bring new challenges. As he made his way to the central hall, Ethan noticed subtle changes in the environment. The corridors seemed to shift slightly as he walked, as if they responded to his presence. He could hear faint whispers of energy, a soft murmur that reminded him of a breeze across the trees of his home planet. He shook his head, unsure if it was the palace or his imagination. Either way, he felt a strange comfort in the building's quiet intelligence. Larissa awaited him in the throne room. She did not speak immediately, only watching him approach with her violet eyes. The air felt charged, alive with anticipation. Finally, she spoke. "Today, you will begin with tasks that are unusual." She gestured to a floating console that projected a 3-dimensional model of the palace gardens. "These gardens require your attention, but not in the way your species might think." Ethan frowned slightly. "How do you mean, Your Majesty?" "They are alive," she said simply. "They respond to emotion, thought, and intention. A careless hand will harm them. A patient mind will help them grow." He had expected complex technology, not emotional plants. But as he studied the gardens through the holographic console, he realized she was serious. The plants shimmered with soft colors, reacting to even the smallest changes in light or motion. Ethan took a deep breath and began adjusting the energy flows that nurtured them, paying close attention to the subtle responses of the flora. As he worked, Larissa observed silently, occasionally stepping closer to point out minor details. Her movements were graceful, almost imperceptible, and Ethan could feel the intensity of her gaze. He became aware that this was more than a simple maintenance task. She was testing him not just for skill, but for patience, perception, and care. Hours passed, and Ethan found himself immersed in the work. The plants responded to his focus, shifting colors and shapes as he guided their growth. Larissa watched from a short distance, her expression unreadable but attentive. Finally, she spoke. "You see beyond the obvious. Good. This is why you are here." Ethan paused, unsure how to reply. He had expected orders, tasks, perhaps even rigid instructions. But the Queen's words hinted at something deeper. He realized that serving Larissa required more than technical ability. It required understanding, empathy, and attention to subtle cues. Later, he was summoned to the palace's central observatory. The room was filled with floating screens displaying planets, stars, and data streams. Larissa approached him with a small device in her hand. "This is an artifact from a distant world," she explained. "It holds knowledge, culture, and emotion. Study it, understand it, and tell me what you feel." Ethan examined the device carefully. It projected scenes of human and alien life, music, art, and celebrations from a planet he had never heard of. He felt a strange mix of wonder and humility. The device captured the essence of a civilization, its joys and struggles, in a way that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. "You feel it," Larissa said softly. "You understand what it means to care, to create, to connect. Most do not. Most only take knowledge for themselves. You respond differently." Her words resonated with Ethan. He had always believed that humans were curious by nature, seeking to understand rather than dominate. Yet he realized that the Queen had never encountered a human who approached the unknown with both intelligence and compassion. She valued qualities he had taken for granted. During the afternoon, a minor crisis occurred. One of the palace's energy conduits began to fluctuate, threatening to disrupt the environmental balance. Ethan rushed to the source, analyzing the readings and making quick adjustments. The system responded to his actions, stabilizing under his careful guidance. Larissa observed from nearby, her expression calm but alert. "You acted decisively," she said. "Many would panic. Many would fail. You did not." Ethan felt a rush of pride, but it was tempered by an awareness that he was still only beginning to understand the palace, the Queen, and his responsibilities. Larissa was not just testing his skill, she was observing his mind, his character, and his ability to remain composed under pressure. As evening approached, Ethan was given another unusual task. Larissa asked him to arrange a series of holographic artifacts in the palace's gallery. Each artifact represented a story, a civilization, or a personal moment from her life. They were not just displays, they were memories, and they seemed to pulse with life as Ethan interacted with them. He moved carefully, considering the placement, orientation, and interaction of each piece. The artifacts responded subtly to his attention, glowing brighter or dimming depending on his focus. Ethan realized that Larissa's desire was not for simple order or efficiency. She sought someone who could perceive meaning, who could appreciate the stories hidden within the objects. When he finished, Larissa approached him. "You are learning," she said. "Not just the tasks, but me. You see more than the surface. That is rare." Ethan felt a mixture of pride and humility. He had come to serve, but he was beginning to understand that this was also a journey of discovery for both of them. Larissa's interest in him was not merely as a servant or technician. It was as a being curious about humanity, someone searching for connection in a universe full of isolation. That night, as Ethan rested in his quarters, he reflected on the day's experiences. Every task, Every observation and every word from the Queen carried layers of meaning. He realized that serving Larissa was about more than fulfilling duties. It was about understanding, interpreting, and responding to subtle cues. The palace itself seemed alive, and the Queen was at its heart, seeking something beyond power or control. Ethan stared out at the glowing spires of the palace against the backdrop of distant stars. He could feel the weight of responsibility and the excitement of discovery mingling within him. Larissa's curiosity, her desire for understanding, and her subtle recognition of his qualities made him feel both honored and challenged. He understood now that this assignment would test more than his skill. It would test his mind, his courage, and his humanity. And as the palace lights dimmed and the hum of energy systems softened into the night, Ethan felt a sense of anticipation. He was only beginning to understand the world he had entered, and the mysterious desires of the alien queen were still largely unknown. Yet he knew that each day would bring new insights, challenges, and moments that would change him forever. The following morning, Ethan felt both anticipation and unease. Each day at the palace revealed new wonders and new challenges. But he had begun to sense that the tasks he received were not merely about maintenance or technology. They were lessons in understanding the Queen, in reading the subtle signals of a being whose mind moved at the pace of stars. Larissa greeted him in the central hall, her violet eyes glimmering with curiosity. She motioned for him to follow, leading him to a secluded chamber he had not visited before. The walls glowed softly with patterns that shifted like liquid light. In the center of the room stood a small device, unlike anything Ethan had seen. It pulsed faintly, as though alive. "This is your task today," Larissa said. "This device records emotional resonance. It responds to truth, to intention, and to understanding. Your job is not to fix it, but to interpret it." Ethan approached the device cautiously. It projected a three-dimensional field, filled with swirling lights that seemed almost alive. He reached out, and the patterns shifted, reacting to the touch of his hand. He realized quickly that this was not a mechanical challenge. It was a test of perception, patience, and empathy. Larissa watched him silently. Her eyes were sharp, but there was a softness there too. A quiet invitation to see more than what was immediately visible. Ethan spent hours observing the device, learning to recognize how his own emotions and thoughts influenced the patterns. Sometimes, the lights pulsed in excitement when he acted confidently. At other times, they dimmed when he hesitated or doubted himself. "You are learning," Larissa said finally, stepping closer. "Not just the device, but the meaning behind it. You understand that what you see is only part of the truth. Interpretation matters." Ethan nodded, though he realized that he was only beginning to grasp the depth of the Queen's intention. She was teaching him more than technology or logic. She was teaching him to see, to feel, and to think beyond the limits of his own species. Later, Ethan was asked to assist in the palace archives. The archives were enormous, containing records from countless worlds and civilizations. Each record was more than information. It was a story, a memory preserved in energy and light. Larissa guided him through the vast collection, selecting records at random and asking him to explain the significance of each one. "This is not about facts," she said. "It is about insight, about seeing the soul of a civilization, the choices its people made, and the lessons they learned. Tell me what you feel, not what you know." Ethan immersed himself in the archives. He saw civilizations rising and falling, witnessed triumphs and tragedies, and felt a deep respect for the lives behind the data. Larissa observed quietly, occasionally nodding or asking a question that made him think in new ways. He began to realize that her desire was not for simple knowledge. She sought connection, a bridge between her vast experience and the essence of beings like him. As the day progressed, a small crisis arose. A minor energy field in one of the palace's wings became unstable, threatening to interfere with the observatory's systems. Ethan rushed to the source, analyzing the readings and making adjustments. He worked carefully, aware that even a small error could cause serious problems. Larissa followed closely, observing his decisions, but she did not interfere. "You are patient," she said when the problem stabilized. "Most would act hastily. Most would make mistakes. You respond differently. That is why you are here." Ethan felt a surge of pride, but also a growing sense of responsibility. He understood that serving the Queen meant more than performing tasks. It meant thinking, observing, and understanding at a level that went beyond ordinary service. After the crisis was resolved, Larissa led him to a chamber filled with alien artifacts. Some were delicate sculptures, others were technological devices with unknown functions. She asked him to arrange them, not by size or shape, but by what he believed reflected their significance. Ethan studied each piece carefully. He considered the history, the possible intentions of the creators, and the emotion embedded within each artifact. The more he thought, the more he realized that Larissa's true test was not about placement or precision. It was about insight and empathy. When he finished, Larissa studied his arrangement quietly. Then she spoke, her voice softer than usual. "You are beginning to understand. You see beyond the surface. That is rare, even among those closest to me." Ethan felt a mixture of pride and humility. He had come to the palace expecting orders and technical tasks, but he was discovering a new way of thinking, a new way of seeing the universe. And with each passing day, he sensed that the Queen's interest in him was not just professional. There was a subtle curiosity in her gaze, a desire to understand him as much as he was learning to understand her. Later, as he rested in a quiet chamber, Ethan reflected on the day's events. The palace was more than a building. It was a living entity, responsive and aware. Larissa herself was unlike any being he had encountered. Her desires were not simple. She sought understanding, insight, and perhaps a companion capable of seeing the universe in ways she could not fully experience alone. He thought back to the device in the morning and the artifacts in the afternoon. Each task, each observation, each quiet word from the Queen was a piece of a larger puzzle. He realized that serving her required more than skill. It required empathy, intuition, and courage. Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime. A holographic display appeared, showing a star system beyond the palace's orbit. Larissa's image materialized beside it. "I have shown you much, Ethan," she said. "But there is still more to learn. And there will be moments when your choices matter more than your skills. You must be ready." 1. Ethan nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He understood that the journey he had begun was far from over. There were mysteries to uncover, challenges to face, and a being to understand whose desires were subtle, complex, and unlike anything he had imagined. As night fell, Ethan gazed out of the window at the glittering stars. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him, but also a sense of purpose he had never known. The Queen's true desire remained unclear, but he was beginning to sense its shape: a need for understanding, connection, and a companion capable of seeing the universe as she did. Ethan knew that each day at the palace would bring new lessons, new tests, and new revelations. And as he drifted to sleep, he felt a quiet determination. He would learn, he would observe, and he would understand not just the technology or the palace, but the heart and mind of the alien Queen who had chosen him to serve. And in that quiet moment, Ethan felt the first true spark of connection. A bond formed not by duty alone, but by curiosity, insight, and the possibility of something extraordinary waiting just beyond the horizon. The morning air in the palace felt heavier than usual. Ethan could sense it even before he left his quarters. Something had shifted. The usually calm corridors hummed with subtle tension. and even the soft glow of the walls seemed sharper, almost alert. As he walked toward the central hall, his mind raced with questions. He had grown accustomed to the palace's rhythms, but today felt different. Larissa awaited him in the throne room. Her expression was composed, yet Ethan noticed a subtle intensity in her eyes. "There are forces within the palace that do not trust the presence of humans," she said quietly. "They have observed you, and some have questioned your role here." Ethan felt a jolt of concern. He had assumed that serving the queen was a matter of following instructions, not navigating political currents. "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" he asked. "There are those who see the presence of a human as a threat. They believe their loyalty to the palace is absolute, and that outsiders cannot understand the complexities of this realm," Larissa explained. "Your task now is not just service, it is proof of understanding, courage, and loyalty. You must show them, and me, that you are capable of more than obedience." Before Ethan could respond, a sudden alarm echoed through the palace. A security breach had been detected in one of the outer wings. Ethan followed the queen and a team of aides to the source. The corridor leading to the breach shimmered with flickering energy barriers, evidence of tampering. Some of the palace staff looked uncertain, but Larissa remained calm, her presence steady and commanding. "This is your challenge," she said. "You will guide us through this. Your choices will determine the outcome." Ethan took a deep breath. He studied the corridor, noticing small inconsistencies in the energy flow. Using his knowledge of the palace systems, he began to trace the source of the instability. The closer he got, the more he realized that this was not a simple technical fault. Someone had attempted to manipulate the palace systems intentionally. He paused, considering his options. A hasty move could trigger a full lockdown, trapping the queen or disabling critical systems. Ethan decided to act carefully, using a combination of human intuition and technical skill. He redirected energy flows gradually, stabilizing the barriers and isolating the tampered systems. Larissa observed silently, her eyes reflecting both curiosity and trust. "You see the problem clearly," she said. "You do not act out of fear or haste. That is valuable." Finally, the breach was contained. Ethan's careful actions had prevented damage to the palace, and the intruders, alien agents working against the queen's interests, were identified and secured. The tension in the corridors slowly eased, but Ethan knew the challenge was more than technical. It was a test of character, and he had passed. After the incident, Larissa led Ethan to a private chamber. The room was quiet, filled with artifacts from countless worlds. "You handled the crisis well," she said. "But your greatest test is not technology. It is understanding me." Ethan listened closely. He had already begun to sense that Larissa's desires were not simple. She did not seek obedience or admiration alone. She sought connection. Someone who could comprehend her thoughts, her curiosity, and her perspective on the universe. "You see my realm through your eyes," she continued. "And yet, you perceive its soul. That is rare. I require someone who can stand beside me, not just in duty, but in understanding, in thought, in presence." Ethan felt a mixture of awe and humility. The queen was not merely powerful. She was searching for someone who could understand her fully, and she had chosen him, a human, to walk this path. Later, he was given another unusual task. Larissa asked him to assist with the creation of a holographic projection, one that would combine knowledge from countless civilizations. The goal was not to replicate history, but to interpret it, extracting lessons, patterns, and insights. Ethan worked alongside her, adjusting parameters and exploring possibilities. As they collaborated, he noticed subtle moments of shared curiosity. Larissa asked questions that challenged his assumptions, prompting him to see connections he had not considered. In turn, his human perspective offered insights that even she had overlooked. They were partners in thought, each learning from the other, and Ethan began to understand the Queen's true desire. Not just service, but companionship of the mind and spirit. In the evening, Larissa led him to a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The plants glowed softly in the twilight, reflecting the patterns of the stars above. She stood silently for a moment, watching the interplay of light and life. Most beings would see only beauty, she said quietly. Some would see only order. But you see meaning. You see connection. That is what I seek. Ethan was struck by the honesty of her words. The Queen's desire was not for adoration or control, but for understanding. For someone capable of perceiving the deeper truths behind the palace, the gardens, and even her own presence. Suddenly, the communication consoles beeped urgently. A distant vessel had approached the palace, its intentions unknown. Larissa's aides murmured nervously, but Ethan felt a calm focus settle over him. Drawing on his knowledge of the palace systems and his understanding of Larissa's methods, he began coordinating defenses, predicting the vessel's trajectory, and preparing protocols to ensure the palace's safety. Larissa watched, a subtle smile touching her lips. "You act with clarity," she said. "Even under pressure, you remain yourself. That is rare. You are learning more than skill. You are learning trust." The threat passed without incident. But the day had tested Ethan in ways he had not anticipated. He realized that serving the Queen required more than intelligence or technical skill. It required courage, insight, and the ability to act decisively while maintaining composure and empathy. As night fell, Ethan returned to his quarters. The palace lights glimmered softly, and the hum of energy systems felt like a heartbeat, steady and alive. He reflected on the events of the day, realizing that the Queen's desires were now becoming clearer. She sought understanding, companionship, and someone capable of seeing the universe through her eyes while maintaining the essence of humanity. Ethan felt a quiet determination. He had faced challenges, navigated crises, and begun to comprehend the Queen's subtle needs. But he knew there was still more to learn. Each day brought new tests, new insights, and new moments that revealed the depth of Larissa's character and her desire for connection. As he lay down to rest, he looked out at the glowing spires of the palace, shimmering against the vast expanse of space. He felt a sense of purpose, stronger than ever before. Serving the alien Queen was no longer just a job, it was a journey of understanding, courage, and growth. And Ethan knew that he would meet whatever came next, prepared to learn, observe, and rise to the challenge. In the quiet of the night, he made a silent promise to himself. He would continue to serve, not only with skill, but with insight, empathy, and integrity. He would strive to understand the Queen, the palace, and the universe she so deeply valued. And in doing so, he would discover not just the secrets of the palace, but the true essence of humanity reflected in a galaxy that stretched endlessly before him. The palace was quiet that morning, yet the air felt alive with anticipation. Ethan knew that today would be different. Over the past days, he had faced tests of skill, patience, and courage. He had repaired systems, solved crises, and navigated challenges that few humans could even imagine. But he sensed now that the ultimate moment was approaching, a revelation of the Queen's true desire. Something that had remained hidden beneath layers of protocol, expectation, and mystery. Larissa summoned him to the throne room. The hall was vast, bathed in soft violet light, the walls shimmering with the palace's subtle energy. Ethan walked slowly, his mind alert but calm. The Queen sat at the center, her posture regal yet relaxed, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that made his heartbeat quicken. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm but commanding, "you have served well. You have faced challenges with skill, patience, and insight. You have observed, learned, and adapted. But there is one thing more. I require one thing that no task, no device, and no test can fully reveal. Ethan stood quietly, attentive. He had sensed it all along, in the small moments of shared curiosity, in the subtle recognition of his thoughts, in the way the Queen allowed him to act with autonomy while observing him closely. You see the palace, the systems, and the artifacts, Larissa continued. But you have also seen me. Not the ruler, not the myth, but the being who seeks connection, understanding, and companionship of thought and spirit. That is what I desire. Ethan's mind raced. He had felt a bond forming over the past days, subtle and unspoken. He had noticed the Queen's curiosity, her interest in his perspective, and the way she challenged him to think beyond his own world. Now, her words made it clear. This was not about service alone, it was about connection, mutual understanding, and the bridging of two very different civilizations. Larissa rose from her throne and gestured to the central chamber. A holographic map of the galaxy materialized, glowing softly. I have traveled across worlds, observed countless lives, and ruled over civilizations beyond number. Yet there is something I cannot do alone. I need a companion who sees, understands, and inspires. You, Ethan, have shown that you are capable of this. You are the one I have sought. Ethan felt a mixture of awe and humility. The Queen's words carried weight far beyond anything he had imagined. He realized that her desire was not for admiration or obedience. It was for someone who could perceive her thoughts, her curiosity, and her vision for the universe. Someone who could stand beside her in understanding and reflection, not as a subject, but as a partner in thought. He began. How could he express the mixture of respect, honor, and understanding he felt in this moment? Larissa's gaze met his, and he realized that silence could speak as much as words. She smiled faintly, as if acknowledging his understanding. There is no need for words, she said. You have shown what matters through your actions, your choices, and your insight. That is enough. The Queen led him to the palace gardens, now glowing in the soft light of the twin moons. The plants shimmered with gentle energy, reflecting the patterns of the stars above. These gardens respond to understanding, not commands. They thrive on intention and care. Just as they do, so too does this galaxy require perception, empathy, and connection. Ethan walked among the glowing flora, feeling the pulse of energy beneath his feet. He realized that the palace, the Queen, and even the galaxy itself were alive with purpose, and that understanding them required more than technical skill. It required heart, insight, and the courage to see beyond the surface. You have proven yourself, Larissa said softly, standing beside him. Not because you followed orders, but because you chose to observe, understand, and act with both mind and spirit. That is what I desire. For a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the gardens and the stars beyond. Ethan felt a profound sense of purpose settle over him. He had not only served the Queen but had also learned from her, grown in understanding, and discovered a new way to perceive the universe. Ethan, Larissa said finally, her voice gentle. I offer you a choice. You may continue to serve as you have, with skill and care. Or you may join me fully, not as a servant, but as a companion in thought, action, and exploration. Together, we can see what no one else has seen, learn what no one else has learned, and journey to places beyond imagining. Ethan's heart raced, but clarity settled in his mind. This was more than opportunity, it was a calling. He had come to the palace, expecting work, challenge, and perhaps adventure. But what he found was connection, trust, and the chance to stand beside a being who sought not only to rule, but to understand. I will join you, he said, his voice steady, full of both respect and determination. Not just to serve, but to learn, explore, and understand alongside you. Larissa's eyes glimmered with satisfaction. "Then, let us begin," she said. The palace seemed to pulse with energy, as if acknowledging their decision. The corridors, the gardens, and even the stars themselves seemed to shine brighter, reflecting the harmony of understanding between two beings from different worlds. Together, they returned to the central hall, where holographic maps and devices awaited. Larissa gestured to a newly designed starship, one that blended human engineering with alien technology. "This will be our vessel," she explained. "Through it, we will explore, discover, and learn, not as ruler and subject, but as companions in thought and curiosity." Ethan studied the ship, marveling at the intricate fusion of technology. He realized that the Queen's vision was not just about exploration, but about partnership. She had sought someone capable of understanding, someone whose courage and insight could complement her own. As the first preparations for departure began, Ethan felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges, discoveries, and wonders beyond imagining. Yet he knew that together with Larissa, they could face anything. Their connection was built on mutual respect, curiosity, and understanding, a bond that transcended species and civilizations. The palace gates opened, revealing the vast expanse of space. Stars stretched endlessly before them, promising adventures, mysteries, and knowledge yet to be uncovered. Ethan stood beside Larissa, ready to step into the unknown. "This is only the beginning," Larissa said softly, her eyes reflecting the light of distant stars. "The universe is vast, and there is much to see. But together, we will understand it in ways no one else can." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight and excitement of possibility. He had come to serve an alien queen, expecting duty and challenge. Instead, he had found partnership, purpose, and the rare gift of connection. The galaxy awaited, full of unknown worlds, civilizations, and wonders. And for the first time, he knew that he was truly ready. As they boarded the starship and the engines hummed to life, the palace slowly faded behind them, glowing faintly against the backdrop of the stars. Ethan looked at Larissa and felt a deep sense of trust and understanding between them. Together, they would explore, learn, and grow not as ruler and servant, but as companions in the grand adventure of the cosmos. And so, their journey began, a human and an alien, united by curiosity, courage, and the shared desire to understand the infinite universe that lay before them.